Meeting is being recorded.
Okay, we're just giving this a few moments to allow everyone to, of course, settle in. Good evening. I will start the formal program in just a few moments as we admit all into this evening's forum. This is definitely different. We do not see our attendees, but we do see them populating in the background here. We have over 120 attendees that are being admitted as we speak. And I am noticing that there's a few with their hands raised. So Leona, if you could please admit Derek Sloan as a panelist, Nadine Wellwood as well. Thank you so much for raising your hand. Please give us a few moments so that we can admit the candidates into the room as panelists. And for those of you who this does take a few moments, so you'll just have to bear with us. Thank you so much for being here this evening. Just a few moments as we settle in, of course, to our forum this evening. Mr. Sloan, good evening. Nadine, thank you for being here. Please note that you will, I'm going to do a quick ask to unmute, and you will then do a mic check with us, please. Derek, go ahead.
Yeah, hi there. Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3.
Perfect. Thank you. Please note that your mics will be muted and unmuted by a staff or volunteer this evening. Nadine?
Hi, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, I'm noticing that our attendees are filling in through the background. I'm just going to offer a little bit of information before we get started. Tarek, thank you for being here. I will unmute your mic just a moment, please.
Hello. Hi, friends. How's it going?
Good. Thank you so much for being here this evening. We're so pleased that all the candidates have made it into the official room this evening, and we will get started in just a moment. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Marilyn Alhus, and I am the Executive Director of the Airdrie Chamber of Commerce. I am pleased to be joined by our Mayor, Peter Brown, this evening as the Airdrie Chamber of Commerce and the City of Airdrie co-host the 2021 Banff Airdrie All Candidates Election Forum. Just a reminder that tonight's forum is being recorded. The link will be available on the Airdrie Chamber of Commerce website, FederalForum event page within the next 24 hours. That's you, Mayor Brown. It's your turn.
Sorry, I love talking when people love it when I'm muted and I'm talking, so it worked really well. Thanks, Marilyn. And thanks to everyone who's watching tonight online. Obviously, it's a great opportunity for our community leaders, our business leaders, and our residents to get better informed on the issues facing Airdrie and how our candidates tonight are going to address these issues if elected. So before we begin, I'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge that today's federal election forum is taking place on the traditional territory of Treaty 7 nations, home of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Siksika, the Kainai, the Piikani, the Tsuut'ina, Stoney Nakoda nations, Wesley, Chiniki, the Bearspaw, and of course, Métis Region 3 people.
Thank you, Mayor Brown. I'd also like to thank our sponsor for this evening, CREB Realtors in Action, and all of our chamber and city volunteers and staff for organizing this valuable platform for local business in the entire community to have a voice. I would now like to introduce our sponsor, Bill McDougall from CREB, to say a few words.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Bill McDougall. I'm the chair of the Political Action Committee at the Calgary Real Estate Board. It is my great pleasure to be here with you tonight for this special forum and the lead up to this year's federal election on Monday, May 20th. Get out and vote. CREB is a proud sponsor of this event, which will certainly work to deepen our understanding of the issues and no doubt cover a broad range of topics that matter to most voters right here in Airdrie. Our membership is a professional association of over 5,800 licensed realtors across the Calgary region and also the surrounding region, including Airdrie, Cochrane, and Okotoks. As you may know, real estate in Alberta is Alberta's second largest industry and accounts for more than 11% of the provincial's GDP. We are an impactful industry working on behalf of housing customers across our region, and our core purpose is to advocate for reducing barriers to home ownership, improving existing housing stock, and ensuring there is choice for all types of home products. On behalf of our realtor members, I want to thank the Airdrie Chamber of Commerce for putting this important event together, and for inviting CREB to participate. With that, I'll pass it back to the chamber team to get us going. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Bill. I would now like to call on Karis Ward from Ambition Performing Arts to please sing our national anthem. And I will rise on that note. Thank you, Karis.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love, and all of us commend. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north, strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Karis. I think my microphone is on. You might have heard me humming along beside you. I apologize. You did an awesome job. Thank you so much. So this evening we'll be hearing from the candidates as they discuss their party's platforms on the issues at hand and articulate their vision for their constituents here in our region, and also their party leadership for our country. Marilyn.
And as the voice of local business and our over 500 members, the Airdrie Chamber's goal for this forum is to encourage dialogue and awareness regarding Airdrie business priorities. We will be asking 3 questions for candidates addressing issues outlined in Roadmap to Prosperity, the Canadian Chamber of Commerce platform of business priorities for the next Canadian government.
Excellent. And of course, we'll have members of City Council will be asking 3 questions as well, the ones that we believe are most important that directly impact our community. Marilyn.
Thank you, Peter. I would now like to welcome and introduce our moderator for the evening, Nikki Nordic. Nikki is the current president of the Airdrie Chamber of Commerce and has been actively involved on the board of directors for the past 4 years. She is a 4th-generation Canadian entrepreneur and has used this upbringing to become the founder and owner of the multi-award-winning business here in Airdrie, Airdrie Puppy Pals. Nikki is a strong advocate for local business and is one of 40 registered canine behaviorists in Canada. Please join me in welcoming to the forum, Nikki Nordic.
Thanks so much, Marilyn. Can everybody hear me okay? Beautiful. I am honored to be moderating tonight's event for the Airdrie Chamber of Commerce and the City of Airdrie. The Chamber has been advocating for businesses since 1973 and is responsible for seeking answers to questions and concerns of importance to their membership. Before we begin tonight's forum, I would like to take a moment to explain the rules to which all candidates have agreed. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to make an opening statement before we proceed to the question and answer portion of tonight's event. On the topics presented by the Chamber of Commerce and the City, each candidate will have 1 minute to respond to the question. Next, questions collected from forum attendees will be directed towards the candidates in attendance this evening. At the time of registration, people were provided with the option of submitting questions. We will be addressing a few pre-submitted questions first. At any time during the forum, attendees can type questions into the chat box. Questions from the chat box will be randomly selected by our volunteers, and candidates will have 1 minute to provide their responses. The chat box will only be monitored for potential candidate questions. And finally, each candidate will have 90 seconds to make a closing statement at the end of the program. This forum is structured in a manner that allows equal opportunity for candidates to express their political views and plans for action, and the effect that this will have on business and the community of Airdrie as a whole. None of the candidates have any advanced knowledge of tonight's questions. For our virtual audience, I ask that you only place questions in the chat box. Disrespectful comments will not be tolerated and may result from you being removed from the forum. In addition, timing will not allow for all questions submitted to be asked. If your question is not asked, we encourage you to reach out directly to the candidates after conclusion of the event this evening. Invitations to participate in this forum were issued to all registered candidates in the Banff Airdrie riding, and all 9 accepted. Now, without further ado, I'd like to list the candidates for the Banff Airdrie riding. Please wave when I say your name in alphabetical order by last name. Aidan Bloom, representing the Green Party. Tarek Elnaga, representing the Maverick Party. David Gamble, representing the Liberal Party of Canada. Carolyn O'Driscoll, an independent candidate. Blake Richards, representing the Conservative Party. Derek Sloan, independent candidate. Ron Voss, independent candidate. Nadine Wellwood, representing the People's Party of Canada. And Sarah Zagoda, representing the NDP Party. Now that the candidates have been introduced, let's begin. Before we get to the hot topics of this evening, each candidate will have 2 minutes to deliver an opening statement. Throughout the forum, volunteers will turn on your microphone when your name is called. You will be required to accept the unmute invitation from the host. Microphones will automatically be turned off at exactly the 2-minute mark. Order of names was randomly generated. Let's begin. Our first candidate is Nadine Wellwood, representing the People's Party of Canada. Nadine?
Thank you, everyone. My name is Nadine Wellwood, and I'm your candidate for the People's Party of Canada. I was hopeful tonight that perhaps just once during this election, I might start without having to defend our Canadian rights and freedoms, but that's just not possible. But I have questions, as I'm sure do you. Why did Jason Kenney close ICU beds last week and then declare an emergency yesterday? Why are we threatening the jobs of thousands of nurses and doctors for refusing a vaccine in the middle of a pandemic? Where is our media in asking the tough questions of these politicians? Why are we not supporting our most vulnerable through the use of available outpatient treatments that have kept as many as 85% of COVID patients out of the hospital? Dr. McCullough, Texas Senate hearing. Why is it that we are forcing Canadians to choose between work and feeding their families or injecting an unwanted foreign substance into their body. Discrimination based upon medical choice is no more acceptable than discrimination based upon color, race, gender, or sexual orientation. It has no place in Canada. Canadians' rights and freedoms are being used right now as political bargaining chips. But freedom does not come with conditions. Freedom is enshrined in the laws of our country. It is the very foundation of our society, and it is granted from a much higher authority than men. The People's Party of Canada is the only national party that rejects mandatory vaccines, rejects vaccine passports, rejects segregation, discrimination, or the granting of rights to some, but not all. I am asking each of you to reflect on what the future of this country will look like in 2, 4, 10 years if we keep on this path. I am asking all Albertans to stand with the People's Party of Canada and to resist the tyranny being imposed upon us. Thank you.
Thank you, Nadine. Next, we'll hear from Carolyn O'Driscoll with the independent candidate. Carolyn?
Thank you, and thank you first of all for hosting, and thank you to everybody who is signed in tonight to hear from all of us and be informed when you cast your vote for this election of 2021. I want to start with where we are at as the constituency of Banff Airdrie. We are a diverse constituency, like a microcosm of Canada, actually. We are diverse in geography, in our resources, in our industries, in our people and our cultures. We have shared principles throughout our constituency, despite our diversity. We value sustainability, equity, and accountability. And in my 30 years as a resident in this riding, I've come to know that we are a people that are respectful, hardworking, and most importantly, intelligent. I find it offensive when politicians and their parties are given our trust and support to represent us and fail to advocate for our concerns or demand that our government institutions and agencies are delivering the services that our tax dollars have paid for. So, as a voter, I ask myself a couple of questions. One, what are the major parties actually doing? Have they engaged local stakeholders to develop their platforms or their plans? Do they actually understand what sustainability means and know how to build and execute a practical, sustainable strategic plan that includes addressing our local issues? Do they understand what equity means? Do they have a realistic plan to eradicate the systemic prejudices that are rampant throughout all of our government institutions and agencies? Can they be transparent and accountable? The second part that I will then ask is, can the party representative actually have the skills to deliver?
Did we lose her? Can you guys still hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Just a quick comment about the clock. If you have your screen, you can change your view around. So you can go to speaker view. There is also a slider bar. If you make it bigger or smaller, you can make the candidate bigger and the clock smaller. And we are looking on the back end to see if we can get the clock even smaller, but there should be some different view options. Thank you very much, Caroline, for your comments. Next, we will have Derek Sloan, the independent candidate.
Hi, my name is Derek Sloan, and my camera, oh, there we go. My name is Derek Sloan. I'm a member of parliament. I was elected as a Conservative 2 years ago, and I ran for leadership of the Conservative Party last year. I traveled from coast to coast as much as COVID restrictions would allow, and I met with tens of thousands of patriotic Canadians. I am so excited to be living in a country where there's so many great people. In that race, I realized that Canadians are very similar. They're concerned about what the government is doing. They're concerned about corruption in the government, and they're concerned about waste, and they're concerned about the curtailing of freedoms. I ran as a Conservative. I was elected as a Conservative. I got into politics because I was very concerned about the freedoms in our country that were evaporating, whether it was freedom of speech or freedom of conscience or other things. And I fought for those principles valiantly. I was ejected from the Conservative Party this year for being too vocal on some of the shenanigans and other corruption that's going on in Ottawa. It is a fact that the handling of COVID-19 has been mishandled at every step of the way. I've done 2 press conferences on Parliament Hill that deal with the handling of COVID-19 and medical whistleblowers that go against what the government is saying should be done. They became some of the most watched political videos of all time. You can view them on my website, dereksloan.ca. It is troubling to see where we're headed as a nation, where our liberties are taken for granted, where political corruption is rampant. And we need members of parliament that are willing to stand. I have always been willing to stand and tell the truth. And that is why I am where I am today. I was ejected from the mainstream parties. Several other politicians have been ejected as well. I've been fighting for small businesses for the last 18 months. I'm a former small business owner myself. And I have been, in many cases, some of the only voices in Parliament standing up for Canadian rights, talking about some of these things that are going on in other parts of the world. Senate testimony in the States that was mentioned earlier that talks about other ways to deal with COVID-19. I have spoken about that on the floor of the House of Commons. I have asked.
Thank you, Derek. Derek, I am sorry, our clock is no longer there for you to see.
Yeah, sure. It kind of threw me off there, so I wasn't sure.
I apologize. We've been getting a lot of feedback about the time clock being overwhelming on the screen. We will actually be doing our best to get that clock back up in some way, shape, or form. But what we will do is do our best to notify the group that you have a clock on the screen at some point to let you know that we're staying on time. Just bear with us. Thank you. Nikki, if you can move on with the script, thank you.
I sure can. Thank you, Derek. Next, we will hear from David Gamble, representing the Liberal Party of Canada. David?
Okay, it finally showed up for me.
There you go.
Hi, I'm David Gamble, and I'm running for the Liberal Party of Canada in Banff Airdrie. And I want you to know a little bit about me. I'm a small business owner. Before that, I was an academic. I've had some involvement in politics in Alberta since at least 2012. I was the Executive Vice President of the Alberta Liberals, the Vice President of Policy of the Alberta Liberals. I ran in 2015 for the Alberta Liberals when I lived in Cochrane, but I ran in Calgary. And I'm doing a swap this time and trying it out the other way. So I have some really strong connections in the community, and people had asked me to run, and I'm really excited to do that. Oh, thank you so much for the time. And I really hope that you'll reach out to me. This is going to be a really short evening, so feel free to ask questions later. I really love to interact with people. I also have a town hall tomorrow night. And so I just wanted to make sure that you checked out our platform. Justin Trudeau did a 90-second version of it. It covers most things. And I really want to highlight the $10 a day daycare. It's going to be a game changer. And I just want to thank everyone for inviting us, particularly the Airdrie Chamber. And I really wish that we're all going to do much better in business in the coming couple of years as we recover from the pandemic. Thank you so much.
Thank you, David. Next, we'll hear from Ron Voss, independent candidate. Ron, if you see on your screen, it should give you an option to unmute.
Can I start again?
There you go. Yeah, please start again.
Okay. I'm your independent candidate for an independent Alberta. I've entered this race to raise the question, what's in it for Alberta sending a politician to Ottawa? My campaign has largely been shaped by 2 books written by Albertan Michael Wagner. The first book, Alberta Separatism, Then and Now, traced out the history of the Alberta and Western independence movements from the 1970s to the year 2008. What I learned from that book is that the federal pathway, sending this or that politician to Ottawa, did not redress the grievances that Alberta had. And most importantly, it caused the independence movements to lose steam. That is, Albertans putting their hope in the federal pathway, which has failed to deliver, only serves to dampen or deflate the self-determination independence movements. In his most recent book, No Other Option, Self-Determination for Alberta, published this year, Michael Wagner makes a strong case for an independent Alberta as being the only option. And that can only be achieved by Albertans determining their own destiny through the provincial political system and not the federal system. Albertans face a stark choice between the status quo with its inevitable economic decline and loss of fundamental freedoms or self-determination and independence. My platform is relatively simple. First of all, seeking his 5th term, career politician Blake Richards, who does not represent the best interests of Alberta, needs to go. Secondly, if elected, I will not go to Ottawa.
10 seconds.
And I will stay in Alberta and use the resources allocated to an MP to advance the cause of Alberta's self-determination and independence.
Perfect. There we go. Okay, so when you guys are speaking, what I'll do is I'll say 10 seconds as quietly as I can. I don't want to interrupt what you're speaking, but I want to make sure that we're all very mindful of time. Thank you, Ron. Next, we'll hear the opening remarks from Tarek El-Nagad. I just said your last name wrong, I'm sorry, representing the Maverick Party. And I'm going to ask to unmute you, and there we go.
That's a-okay, thank you. Hi, friends. My name is Tarek El-Nagad. I'm a small business owner. I live right here in Airdrie, and I'm an engineer, and I'm also a team roper. And when I think of the West was built on some amazing values. It was built on grit. It was built on perseverance, freedom, community, and respect. And the town of Airdrie was built on those very same values. The Maverick Party is really an extension and an embodiment of those values. We're the only party, the only federal party that's running from the West and exclusively for Western Canada. For too long, we've counted on Eastern Canada and Central Canada to form our federal government. And friends, you know how it goes. By the time Manitoba starts to vote, the government's already decided. Now it's time to end this decades-long reliance on an Eastern-based, Eastern-led Conservative Party. Whether it's on industries, finances, development, economic or environmental growth, it's felt so long that we've counted on Ottawa, and Ottawa knows best. We've seen it last week in the federal debates. If you've watched them, I want you to think of how many times Quebec was mentioned versus Western Canada as a whole. Western Canada probably got about 60 seconds of airtime in a 2-hour debate. So why is it good for Quebec to have its own representation, but not Western Canada? So this time around, let's send a clear message to Ottawa that you refuse to be taken for granted, that you refuse for Western issues to take second place in exchange for Eastern votes. My dream really is a Western Canada that is strong, prosperous, and doesn't depend on Ottawa to do what's right by us. And the premise of the Maverick Party is incredibly simple and incredibly uncomplicated. If it's good for the West, it's good for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Tarek. Next, we'll hear from Sarah, representing the NDP party. Sarah?
Hello. Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. My name is Sarah Zagoda. I'm a married mom of 3. I live in Airdrie, and I am running for the NDP because their core values align with mine. And that's bringing everybody together and helping lift Canada up. Some of their major platform policies are head-to-toe healthcare, which is accessible mental health supports, dental care, prescription coverage for all, and adding post-secondary education to the public education system. And that would be amazing because it would allow anybody to go to school regardless of their income. The NDP also wants to do many other things like cap fees on cell and internet plans, make internet accessible to everybody, high-speed internet. We want to protect workers and protect the environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Next, we'll hear from Aidan Bloom representing the Green Party.
Hey guys, I hope everyone can hear me. My name is Aidan Bloom. I'm with the Green Party of Canada. And in this election, I am running for the first time. And it's because of a lot of the same reasons why you guys are fed up with the political establishment that I decided to put my hat in the ring. I think this pandemic proved that we have seen a lot of inequalities for working families. And we've seen that our healthcare system was not prepared for a pandemic such as this. And that I find that a lot of people across the province, in this riding and across the country, are so fed up with Ottawa that they're not willing to trust their politicians anymore. And I think that that's a sorry state for the political arena. Why I'm running is because I believe that if we lift up every working family, and that if we make sure that not a single person is left behind in a just transition towards a green economy, that we have an amazing opportunity to launch ourselves forward into a different way to perform politics, into a different economy, and into a different society. I think Alberta is very fortunate in having one of the best skilled labor forces on the continent. I think that there's no excuse that one of the richest countries on earth cannot provide the tools, skills, and training that is required to transition every worker across this province through a just transition towards reliable employment and reliable security for their families to tackle some of the crises that we're seeing as far as the climate crisis, the housing crisis, and the overall affordability crisis. I think if we work together, I can one election at a time prove to you that I'm a trustworthy person who is in this for the right reasons, and I hope to prove that each and every day. Thank you.
Thank you, Aidan. And next we'll hear from Blake Richards representing the Conservative Party. Blake?
This election is about securing the future. The past 6 years under a Trudeau government, and in particular the last year and a half, have been very difficult. And I know many residents here, myself included, are incredibly frustrated. And I'm sure that we're going to hear some of that frustration expressed here tonight. But we have a choice to make. Do we let Justin Trudeau succeed in dividing us so that he can win another chance to govern? Or do we stick together to get this country back on track? And I stand before you tonight ready to continue to fight for you, to continue to get results for you and your family, to work hard for you with the same passion, strength, and determination as I always have. To be the honest, trustworthy, compassionate, and dedicated community servant that you all know me to be. I'll be fighting for the lady who I met here, who immigrated here for a new opportunity and was literally in tears on her doorstep as she told me that she's now worried that she'll lose her home because she can no longer find work in our energy sector and sees no hope if Trudeau gets reelected. And I'll be fighting for the couple I met here in Airdrie with young kids at home who both have small businesses and are struggling to keep them afloat. And I'll be fighting for the far too many young people all across this riding who can't even afford to rent, let alone buy a home. I'll be fighting for you and your family, for your future, for your freedoms, for your opportunity, and for our country. If you believe, as I do, that we deserve better and that our best days as a country can still be ahead of us, then I ask for your support to secure the future together.
We will now move on to the question and answer portion of tonight's event. Please note that each candidate will have 60 seconds to answer each chamber question, and I will say 10 seconds as that minute is rounding up. I will call on each candidate randomly to respond. The following are questions that pertain directly to our Canadian Chamber of Commerce Roadmap to Prosperity platform. I would now like to call upon Marilyn Alhus, Executive Director of the Airdrie Chamber of Commerce, to provide some background on the Roadmap to Prosperity platform and to ask the first question. Marilyn?
Thank you, Nikki. The Canadian Chamber of Commerce platform, Roadmap to Prosperity, seeks to restore Canada's economic potential and reflects the priorities and concerns of job creators in communities across the nation. Canada's businesses are the front line of the economy, and what affects them affects the economic well-being of every Canadian. There is no path to affordability for all Canadians without business growth to fuel the creation and sustainability of new and better paying jobs. Developed in partnership with Canada's provincial and territorial chambers, Roadmap to Prosperity lays out 7 priorities, each with a series of specific measures to attract investment to Canada, help businesses create jobs, and grow and strengthen our communities. This evening, our chamber will be asking 3 questions that pertain to this platform. The first question this evening is, with their larger counterparts, Canadian small to medium-sized enterprise need relief from the tax and regulatory systems that have become increasingly complex and dysfunctional over the years. But SMEs also face challenges that are unique to them. What resources will you offer to help small and medium companies grow and succeed?
Again, the order of candidate responses has been randomly generated. We will start with David Gamble.
Hello, can you repeat the question? Sorry. It took me too long to get my mic to work.
I can. Like
Okay,
the
I can
larger.
Yeah.
Do you want me to
Just the
repeat it?
last part of the question, the specific detail that you're asking for.
What resources will you offer to help small and medium companies grow and succeed?
Okay, so I'm going to talk about some resources that have already been made available. As a small business owner myself, they're integral to me being able to keep my staff during the pandemic. I completely disagree with everything that Blake said about the last year and a half. If it were not for the money coming from government the last year and a half, many of us would have lost our businesses. And I think that's an insensitive thing to say, considering that the virus is not political and we shouldn't really politicize it. Now, I want to just point out one thing that's very important. We have this local buy local campaign that was paid for by the federal government, and that's going to have a huge impact on small businesses as they revamp, bring themselves back up to, back to pre-pandemic levels. Also, the hiring credits and the other credits are instrumental in ensuring that businesses will be able to react to the economy as it improves as we fight the pandemic.
10 seconds.
Thank you so much.
Next, we'll hear from Aidan Bloom.
So I think small businesses were given the raw end of the deal for the last 18 to 19 months. I think that across communities like Airdrie, Cochrane, and Canmore, where I live, and all the rest of the communities in between, I think experienced what a lot of Canada experienced, which is that larger companies and corporations felt the benefits of record-setting profits year after year, even during a pandemic. And yet when it was small businesses who couldn't afford to keep on their employees, or who couldn't afford to get back on track every time we reopened, closed, and reopened and closed, I felt that the breaks were being given to the big box chain stores throughout these communities and not the smaller businesses. So what the Green Party proposes and what I propose is that if I'm elected, I will go to Ottawa and make sure that smaller businesses do not feel the brunt of the reopening of the economy, and that they're given the opportunity to lift themselves up, and that we'll go after the corporations to make sure that they pay their fair share to ensure that this can be done in a just way. Thank you.
Next, we'll hear from Ron Voss.
Yeah, and you did mention something about a complex and dysfunctional federal system. So that comes back to what I'm saying. We got to get out of the federal system. It doesn't encourage or help any kind of business development in Canada. And particularly, and Aidan nailed it there, lockdowns were particularly brutal for small businesses. The Amazons and whatever, they benefit. And nobody was taken to task the benefit or the utility of lockdowns, which were doing no damage, more damage than the cure they're trying to benefit. Nobody made that case, and because the media would shut that down, or if you made a comment like that on Facebook, it would be shut down. So that was a big problem for our businesses, and they suffered immensely because of that.
10.
I'm done.
Okay, works for me. Next, Derek Sloan.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm a former small business owner, and when I ran as leader of the Conservative Party, I had a very extensive small business platform. I believe that small businesses are often disadvantaged in relation to large businesses. We saw this during the pandemic. While many big businesses were allowed to stay open and small businesses were shut. And now that we're facing more lockdowns, many small businesses have told me they don't think they can make it through. The place where I have my office, someone had a business for 5 years in Airdrie. They had to shut down because of the pandemic. This cannot go on. But I do want to say generally, as someone who's very knowledgeable about the small business space, I had many things in my platform as running as leader. For example, a higher small business lifetime capital gains exemption. I said that the government should pay the Canadian pension plan portion of self-employed people. Most people don't know that self-employed people have to pay double the CPP as other people do. I also am against the carbon tax and the Paris Agreement, which advantages foreign manufacturers in relation to Canadians. I don't believe that the rules are fair for small.
Next, we'll hear from Nadine Wellwood.
So again, as a small business owner, I've owned an aerospace and defense company. I've worked in Ottawa. I understand the disadvantages of competing against large corporations. And the small businesses were the ones hardest hit by this pandemic. And it wasn't a result of the pandemic. It was a result of the government's response to the pandemic that has hurt them the most. Government is the biggest expense to Canadians. And if you want the solution, we need to get government out of the way. Smaller government, we need people, innovation, and small businesses, which are the solution to correcting the wrongs that have been done. I trust Canadians, I trust Albertans, not the government, to see us through this process. Affordability is a big issue, and inflation right now is running rampant. If we want to quell that, then it's very simple. We stop the printing presses. Stop the printing presses and life becomes more affordable. No carbon tax, more affordability. Thank you.
Next, we'll hear from Carolyn O'Driscoll.
Hi, thank you for the question. This goes back to the basics. There's two roles government has to play, whether it is the sitting government or opposition. One, develop policy and law, but also hold our institutions to account. Let's look at the practicalities here. We're hearing great visions, but how many candidates and how many parties are recognizing the dynamics and what our government institutions are already doing? Exact example, collaboration between Provincial Service Alberta and CRA, Canada Revenue Agency. Overhaul internally to become more efficient. And I know of a private business owner who took several months to get a GST number just to function and needed to actually make a report and complaint to the ombudsman before the CRA actually issued a number. We need to look and review at how our government institutions are functioning and increase their efficiencies first to build a plan out. Thank you.
Tarek Eldnaga.
Hello, there'd be four things that I would do to help small businesses in the area. One is uncomplicate the federal tax system and have a single return for tax and provincial returns rather than two right now. Two, I'd cut red tape for registering your business and focus that predominantly on the localized municipal level rather than going to have to go register at a provincial and or federal level, depending on what sector that you're in. Three is reduce unnecessary burdens on small and medium businesses, especially including things like the carbon tax. And two, I'm looking at a very Western focused platform, which means that in essentially eliminating equalization payments that a portion of your federal taxes go into. And then four is allowing businesses to keep more of their money, so a low tax system that allows them to then reinvest and regrow their business. Thank you.
Blake Richards.
I spent a few years as our party's small business critic or shadow cabinet minister. And during that time, besides fighting back against the Trudeau government's attempt to really cripple our small businesses with punishing new taxes, which we were able to successfully stop by, engaging, your chamber and many other chambers across this country to fight back. I also had the opportunity to spend a lot of time talking with chambers of commerce all across this country. And certainly at that time, and it it remains to be a problem today. One of the biggest things I heard about was the need for reducing red tape in this country. That is one of the biggest barriers that are put up, especially for our small businesses, to being able to succeed and grow a business. Of course, we've also seen over the last year and a half, the challenges that have come from and we have a plan called Canada's Recovery Plan to help small businesses rebuild. And we would implement that plan, which would encourage new businesses to come up and to get other businesses rebuilt so that people can get back to work and we can get our.
Sarah Zagoda.
Hello. The NDP actually have a very good plan to help small businesses. We want to modernize Canadians' competition laws. We want to implement an anti-gouging legislation and have a fair gasoline watchdog to investigate gouging. To support small businesses, lower taxes for small businesses, wage and rent subsidies, long-term hiring bonuses to pay employer portion of EI and CPP for newer rehired staff. We want to strengthen and modernize the Investment Canada Act to protect Canadian jobs, stop foreign takeovers without a national security review, expand critical domestic manufacturing capacity. As we have noticed during this pandemic, we were out PPE equipment and we need to bring that back home. And a national automotive strategy. There's more, it's on our platform. Thank you.
I'm so grateful that we have the opportunity to do this and the technology to do this. And I apologize to those who are going to be hearing me say 10 in their sleep for the next 2 years. We will move on. I'd now like to call upon Shane Grope, member of the Airdrie Chamber of Commerce Advocacy Committee, to ask the second question. Shane?
Thank you, Nikki. Our taxes fund government programs and initiatives that contribute to making Canada the great country it is, and businesses are willing to pay their share. However, while other jurisdictions make their tax system more competitive, Canada's is becoming increasingly complex and inefficient, killing investment and jobs. How will your party implement a tax system that is fair, efficient, and modern?
Again, the order of candidate response was randomly generated, and I will say 10, well, we have 10 seconds left. We will start with Carolyn O'Driscoll.
I'm grateful to hear the question, how? I think you need all the stakeholders at the table. Too often, government plans and policies are being developed by the bureaucrats, and they are not engaging the people who are actually impacted by the decisions that they're making. I think you need to actually have small and mid-sized business owners at the table, engage in the conversation and explaining and being part of the solution building on what kind of tax strategy makes the most sense to really give them the benefit of what is being structured. I think all stakeholders need to be at the table for design. That way the execution will be sustainable and will be efficient and fair for all. Thank you.
I muted myself. Thank you. Next, we will hear from Aidan Bloom.
So I think tax reform is going to be a must if we're going to generate a society that can move away from constant growth that sees to only inflate the profits of a few while leaving countless working people and their families kind of high and dry like we've seen in this pandemic. So what I'd like to see and what my party would like to see is that the corporate tax rate be raised to a competitive 19%. Which would still be lower than the United States rate. I would also like to see that we put a luxury tax on all homes and property after your first home so that we can start to go after the excess wealth that's not being taxed fairly. I think that if we offer more securities and programs to people who are struggling with affordability, like when I look at renters, I would like to see having a renters association established by the government that would offer a middleman to protect renters at the bargaining table. We don't have anything like that in Canada that's efficient. I would like to see that change. And then I think in a just transition, we need to make sure that the education and training is given to every worker to make sure that no one's left behind. Thank you.
Thank you, Aidan. Now we'll hear from Tarek.
So in the last 6 years under Trudeau government, the Canadian competitive tax rate went worse from the 14th worst to the 7th worst. So as that number gets smaller, that actually gets worse. And a big part of that is irresponsible spending by the government to the point where we have to get that money from somewhere and we're getting it from tax owners. So this is what I would do. One, like I said, I would drop the carbon tax so that businesses don't have that unnecessary burden proposed by both the Conservatives and the Liberals. Two is I would stop $19 billion a year of oil imports that actually generates revenue for the country here to help pay for the deficit so we don't have to bring it from small business. And then the fourth thing, or the third thing rather, I would do is keep the money here in the West. So right now, businesses in Western Canada spend a lot for Quebec's fiscal irregularities and fiscal irresponsibility. Keep that money here in the West and allow it for Western businesses to invest in their own jurisdiction. Thank you.
Thank you, Tarek. Next, we'll hear from Nadine Wellwood.
So the PPC in 2019 proposed that we would reduce taxes after balancing the budget in 2 years. That is no longer feasibly possible to balance the budget as we now have 1.3 trillion in debt and are spending $424 million a day in borrowed money. So the first thing that we would do is to simplify the tax filing. It is too complicated, and we would continue to advocate for lower taxes for all Canadians. Once we have balanced the budget, now it will take us 4 years. In addition to that, vaccine passports are going to destroy the small and medium-sized business, which is the heartbeat of our economy. That is going to decrease our revenues of what we are able to afford as far as funding programs and everything else goes. We need to eliminate the carbon tax and make life more affordable. And we need to increase our revenues and, of course, our natural resources and production of oil and gas. Thank you.
Thank you, Nadine. Next, we'll hear from Sarah Zagoda.
Hi there. The NDP has lots of plans to change taxes. Like we said, we want to lower taxes for small businesses and provide bonuses for wage subsidies. We want to introduce a temporary COVID-19 access profit tax. So for companies, for large billion-dollar companies who made an excessive amount of money this year, like Amazon Canada, for example, we wanted to charge them an additional 15% tax to help our general revenue stream. We also want to tax the rich. That's not your average person that's making like $100,000 a year or a little bit more. We're talking people that make, families that make $10 million a year. And that will inject billions and billions and billions of dollars back into our economy. And also a luxury tax. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Next, we'll hear from Blake Richards.
Well, this is a real problem. Our tax system is so complex that I don't even think most accountants or tax lawyers can actually understand it, let alone the average taxpayer. So this is definitely an issue that needs to be addressed. We have a plan to, if we were to form a Conservative government, which would be to launch a comprehensive review of Canada's tax system. The goal being, of course, to improve competitiveness, to bring down rates, and also to simplify the rules. That would allow us, obviously, to make things more affordable for people and simplify people's abilities there. Also, we would make the taxpayer ombudsman, which was something that we created as Conservatives, an officer of Parliament, which would actually give them order-making abilities, which is a critically important thing because often, governments stymie things that are looking to try and do to change the tax system, and this would allow that to be fixed.
Now we hear from Ron Voss.
Well, I'm really pleased everybody's pointing out the deficiencies of the tax system. It's too complex and efficient. So yeah, that's another reason we'll separate. We'll have our own tax system, and we won't have an extra level of complexity that doesn't seem to help to benefit anybody. Ms. O'Driscoll pointed out the importance of stakeholders at all stakeholders at the table. Well, the way the system works is every politicians have to cater to central Canada. So not everybody's at the table. They don't care what happens to Alberta. The election's over by the time it reaches Manitoba. And talking about a carbon tax, this guy signed a pledge that he would not introduce one. And then he did. How can anybody elect somebody who is so willing to just renege on his signing his name to a document? So that tax causes a lot of problem for people. I'm okay.
Thank you, Ron. Next, we will hear from Derek Sloan.
Okay, thank you so much. When I was in law school, I studied tax, and the Income Tax Act is one of the most complicated pieces of legislation in existence because it has been added to, subtracted from hundreds of times in the last 60 years. The last time that we had comprehensive reform or even looked into the Tax Act was in the 1960s. We do need another commission. I agree with that suggestion on your website. When I ran for leader of the Conservative Party, I said many things about taxes. I believe we need lower personal income tax rates. I believe we need fewer brackets. And I believe that the federal government needs to give more room to provinces to raise revenues for things that are under provincial jurisdiction. For example, healthcare. I believe right now we have a revenue issue, we have a debt issue. Our provincial and federal debt is now 91.6% of our GDP. This is scary, friends. We need to cut government spending. We also need to raise our revenues. Destroying our energy industry and adding many promises for new spending, as the Liberals and Conservatives are doing.
Next, we'll hear from David Gamble.
Hello. Yeah, I won't be able to respond to everything everyone said there. I'll focus on the things that we're doing. So, we've been closing a lot of loopholes for offshore spending or taxation, tax evasion. A more recent promise is a 3% tax on banks that are making more than $5 billion a year. And that money is going to go into our housing program. I think there's definitely an advantage to spending time to reevaluate the tax system as a whole. But there's a lot of good things that are happening, particularly the carbon tax is wonderful. It allows our energy companies to push forward with certainty. They know what the price is going to be. They know when it's going to happen. They're able to keep their businesses going. That money gets reinvested into our country in ways that allow us to continue to drop our carbon. And yeah, check out our website, see what else we're looking out for, and I hope to hear from you. Take care.
I would now like to call upon Amy Ballman, member of the Airdrie Chamber of Commerce Advocacy Committee and the Chamber's second vice president, to ask our third question. Amy?
Thank you, Nikki. So Canada is a trading nation, and agreements signed in recent years have created significant new market opportunities. Canadian businesses are eager to take advantage of these agreements, but cannot do it alone. How will you plan to access new markets around the world and the elimination of trade barriers at home?
Thanks, Amy. We will start with Nadine Wellwood, representing the People's Party of Canada.
Well, as I've already said, we need smaller government and more initiative, more innovation from our small business owners. And it's very simple. We just need to get government out of the way. People are the solution to the economic problems that we have. We have a small group of individuals in government, and we have 38 million people in Canada, all of them with their own ideas, creativity, their ability to produce for themselves. We have natural resources that are extremely abundant. But one of the things we have to do is start promoting Canada first. We need to bring back some manufacturing to Canada. We need to make sure that we have pipelines, we have oil and gas that we're supplying not only to ourselves, but to our trading partners in the United States, who right now, oil and gas is coming in from Saudi Arabia. Why is it that Canadian oil and gas is not fulfilling that need? We have Canadian oil and gas that should be coming up in a pipeline across Canada and not up from the St. Lawrence. Thank you.
Thank you, Nadine. Next, we'll hear from Aidan Bloom representing the Green Party. Aidan?
Well, I think when you talk trade, you have to understand that free trade has meant some of the biggest growths that we have seen in the history of humanity as far as economics are concerned. Now, what's not being talked about is that in all the large free trade agreements that we've seen over the last 100 years, maybe more recently the last 50 years, is that working people, employees, and sectors of this country never see the revenue, never see the potential of what this is giving to some of the biggest stakeholders. So what I would like to see is the end of free trade, to move towards more of a focus of fair trade, so that we're bringing revenues home, and then so people will actually legitimately see the potential of what these trades can do at the gas pump, at the grocery store, in the housing market, so that we're ensuring that Canadian products and that Canadian labor is bringing home Canadian revenue to your family's table. And I think it's important that we understand that free trade hasn't been doing it for Canadians, and it's time we look in the mirror and try to adjust.
Thank you, Aidan. Next, we'll hear from Sarah Zagoda representing the NDP party. Sarah?
Hi there. This is a complicated question. The NDP want to, modernize Canada's competition laws. And if we're talking about farmers and grain, we used to have the Canadian Wheat Board, which the previous Conservative government sold, which has been a big disadvantage to our farmers. Instead of being able to trade the wheat freely as they want, now they're condemned to trading with just a couple big partners and not being able to negotiate their prices very well. So I would probably I'd like to bring that back and hear from farmers on what they want to do about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Next, we'll hear from Blake Richards representing the Conservative Party. Blake?
Well, I think I'd first like to tell our farmers out there, who I know how hard they fought for years to have the freedom to market their own grain, that it's sad to hear a candidate telling us that they would bring back the Canadian Wheat Board monopoly on Western Canadian farmers, and I certainly would never want to see that happen. Now, when we come to this issue, first of all, we have, before we even get outside of our own country, we have so many internal trade barriers in this country, and we'd like to start by knocking some of those down so that we can trade freely amongst our provinces. When it comes to international, certainly we believe that trade agreements, we should seek those out with, like, free trade with free nations is what we're calling it. We want to seek out stronger ties with those countries who share our values and see trade happening there. We also firmly believe that if we want to fix some of the economic issues in this country, we need to get some pipelines to export markets. And that is something that will be of very critical importance to Conservative government as well.
Thank you, Blake. Next, we'll hear from Ron Voss, independent candidate.
Wow, how to access new markets around the world and trade barriers. Boy, is that ever a sore point for Alberta. The federal processes and policies disallowing Alberta to construct pipelines so they can reach the market. I mean, come on, we can't get any worse than that. And, and they're doing it all because of climate change, some kind of silly notion that the emissions of carbon dioxide is going to cause some kind of climate disasters, which is absolute nonsense. Meanwhile, China's building all kinds of coal-fired power plants. They're looking over at the West and they're just laughing and saying, we're trying to be the dominant economic power in the world, and they're killing their own economies. So yeah, we'll fix this. We'll be better able to unlock the lock by becoming an independent nation, and we'll be in better position to negotiate getting our own products to markets. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Next, we'll hear from Derek Sloan, independent candidate.
Yes, thank you so much. So I was a small business owner for several years. I founded and operated my own furniture store. And one thing that I noticed in the furniture industry, and I believe this is indicative of a broader problem, is that the furniture industry was destroyed over a period of basically 2 decades in Canada. We had a thriving industry of homemade furniture here in Canada that was destroyed over about 2 decades by basically cheap imported goods that were of inferior quality that basically destroyed our own ability to manufacture here. These agreements can be good, but they're not always. And many of these other countries don't play by the same rules that we do. I want to build more things in Canada. The carbon tax, of course, if I was to make a piece of furniture in Canada, I'd have to pay a carbon tax, but I could import something in from China. They don't have to pay a carbon tax. They don't have to pay carbon taxes in these other countries. And it makes an unequal playing field. Carbon tax is a reverse tariff on our own goods, and I will always stand against it.
Thank you, Derek. Next, we'll hear from David Gamble, representing the Liberal Party of Canada.
As many of you know, the Liberal government has negotiated several agreements recently, including the new NAFTA. We believe it's a way to have prosperity, to work with other countries and to open our borders to other countries and welcome trade with them. One thing I just want to really point out here, though, is it seems like a lot of the other candidates are really negative about international trade and what they think we're getting and how things are going. But, you know, I think as somebody who's been on the board and vice chair of American Chamber of Commerce in Canada, West and Canada as well. I mean, we're so closely tied together. We're working together. There's so many success stories, and Alberta is one of the places that's really doing that. And I want to point out something that Caroline was saying about our bureaucracy not working together with our government. That's just not true. We have Invest Alberta. We have similar things from the government of Canada where we can ensure that Canadians are able to access new markets. So I just want everyone to do some homework on that, the other candidates here, when they're saying these negative things.
Thank you, David. Next, we'll hear from Tarek Elnaga, representing the Maverick Party. Tarek?
Thank you. So for the three core industries in this riding, one, oil and gas, we're looking at a Western focus where we could have pipelines built from the Bay to Kitimat and not need permission from Eastern Canada to ship our own resources, which the Conservatives don't even support. They've told Quebec, Energy East is off the table. You don't need to take our oil. Two, when it comes to agriculture, we have internal barriers as well within Western Canada. You can't buy a case of wine and bring it in from Kelowna, and you can't sell slaughtered beef from Alberta into BC. So removing trade barriers in the West before we even look outside. And then three, Airdrie is a huge aviation town. Why is it cheaper for you to fly outside of Canada than in it? Or why doesn't WestJet get the same treatment that we look at other airlines in Canada? And then why do we continue to burden our aviation industry with carbon taxes proposed by both the Conservatives and the Liberals?
Thank you, Tarek. Now we'll hear from Carolyn O'Driscoll, an independent candidate.
Getting used to the camera. Sorry, I keep leaning in, everybody. I think we have to go back to our foundation, you guys. The Constitution has us established as a federal country. We have a federal government and we have provinces. Each have their own jurisdictions. And that was hundreds of years ago. We have evolved into a global world. And so it is critical that our provincial and our federal governments collaborate with one another to actually build sustainable plans. And you've got to do that from the inside out. You have to address the internal barriers that are there right now because a lot of areas within Canada have been working as silos. Look at qualified professionals, for example, how difficult it is for them to move to one area to another. You have to deal with those issues first and then move forward. Why I flag the concern that there's a lack of collaboration is because we've heard repeatedly from this panel, several of the candidates wanting to distinguish provincial from federal issues. Sustainable solutions require collaboration.
Thank you. That concludes the questions from the Chamber of Commerce. The following questions are that pertain to the City of Airdrie municipal issues. I would now like to call upon Mayor Peter Brown to ask the fourth question of the evening. Mayor Brown?
Excellent. Thank you, Nikki. So I don't know if all of you are aware, but municipalities own 62% of the infrastructure across the country, and provide vital services, obviously, to our communities to, as it relates to safety, enhance our residents' experience, their well-being, and create local and thriving economies. For operating our revenues, we have user fees and property taxes mainly that make up the difference. And unlike other levels of government, we cannot run deficits. And I wish the provincial and federal governments would follow the same footprint. However, that's another question. The federal government needs to create a better working partnership with municipalities to better address the needs of our residents and businesses. So, if elected, what will you do to work with municipalities in your riding to most effectively address the challenges and opportunities within federal jurisdiction? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Brown. We will start with Tarek Ilnaga. Tarek?
So our stance is very clear, and it's very different than any of the national parties. And that is, we are focused exclusively on Western Canada. So when it comes to infrastructure appropriations for municipalities in the West, that is our only customer. Whereas the other parties, whether left or right, have to make their appropriations first for large municipalities in Eastern Canada, because those are where the highest number of voters are. So we can exclusively speak for municipalities in the West here. When it comes to infrastructure appropriations, large projects, etc., we have one customer and one customer only, and that's the Western municipalities. Thank you.
Thank you, Tarek. Now we'll ask Carolyn O'Driscoll. Oh, you're still muted. Is there a button?
Sorry about that.
There we go.
I've participated in several National Energy Board hearings, and it's so interesting when you look at the tax and toll revenues that come off of an energy project and go into the federal coffers and don't necessarily trickle down to the places that are most impacted by that particular development. I think there is ample opportunity here for better relationships to be developed between the municipal entities, because I'd flag, most people probably aren't aware, but the situation for unreserved communities is just, if not more, precarious because they have very little ability to generate their own taxes. So there is ample opportunity here for more strategic planning to happen with the federal government to actually engage with all of those municipalities that are being impacted by things of national interest, so that the infrastructure question can be addressed and resolved. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. Next, we will talk to Ron Voss. Ron?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the mayor mentioned within the federal jurisdiction. I think that's something to really pay attention to. If you look at our Constitution, there's the division of responsibilities and powers. And he's mentioning infrastructure, okay? I don't believe the federal government is responsible for building a swimming pool or a library, or in Alberta, Trudeau came into town and he says he's going to give you money for the Green Line or whatever it is. They will give a lot of money to Central Canada, and this infrastructure spending, which is inappropriate outside of our Constitution, this leads to pork barrel politics. They use our money to buy votes. And one time I met with Blake a couple of years ago and I complained about that. And he said, nah, I think it's okay. It's not okay where you're buying votes using our tax dollars.
Thanks, Ron. Next, we'll hear from Sarah Zagoda. Sarah?
Hi there. The NDP are committed to helping municipalities with infrastructure, helping their waste management programs, recycling, moving things to more towards greener net zero energy. They want to help with electric. They want to bring in electric vehicles, make them more accessible, and generally help everybody out. The federal government should absolutely pay a bigger portion for the big 40th overpass, for example, the federal government. So I would fight for that for the city of Airdrie. I would also fight for this chat about a railway system to help increase tourism and from the airport to Banff and stop in all the towns, and I would support that.
Thank you, Sarah. Next, we'll hear from Blake Richards.
Well, one of the candidates mentioned that he would focus specifically on the West. Well, I can do that one better. I would focus specifically on our constituency of Banff Airdrie. And that's how I've always approached these issues, is I focus on advocating for our communities. And the best way to do that, of course, is to keep in touch with the municipal councils to find out what the priorities are of the community. I spend time door knocking in between elections, something I do continually, to hear what the priorities are of residents. And that way we can advocate for what's most important for the community. That's led to a lot of positive results during my time in office. Can you imagine what Veterans Boulevard would look like right now if it was still a 2-lane road? We were able to get that twinned under a Conservative government, and that's a good piece of infrastructure. The Plainsman Arena, we put investments in the Genesis Place, and I can list a whole host of others. But the bottom line is working with local municipalities and the community to make sure we deal with your priorities and get the job done.
Thank you, Blake. Next, we'll hear from Derek Sloan. Derek?
Okay, well, thank you so much. And as a current member of parliament, I've seen how the infrastructure money is sort of spent. And it is spent in a very politicized fashion and in an ideological fashion. And I want to thank Mayor Brown for that question. And we actually had a lengthy discussion on the phone a few days ago about this issue. Unfortunately, many communities, but certainly Airdrie, needs infrastructure funding. And what we're seeing is that instead of stable and predictable funding, we're seeing a patchwork of programs that the municipalities spend hours and hours and hundreds of thousands of dollars applying for different programs. They never know what they're going to get, and it always falls short. We need to advocate for stable and predictable funding that is not based on political interests, so that the municipalities can plan and stop wasting their time and their money on feasibility studies and other kinds of things, not even knowing if they're going to get the funding that they're searching for. So this is something that's very important. I've experienced dealing with municipalities on these very issues, and infrastructure funding needs to change.
Thank you, Derek. Next, we'll hear from Nadine Willwood. Nadine?
Thank you. The answer is simple. We need a much smaller federal government. Thank you, Mayor Brown. And we are the only party that seems to be advocating for less government, not more. The most responsible and the most accountable and the most responsive government is the one that is closest to its people. And that's the people who elect them and represent them. Services need to be provided mostly at a local level because they know what their constituents want and they know what their constituents need. If we can free up people's tax dollars, which are being wastefully spent, and billions upon billions of borrowed money, and put that back into the hands of local communities where they can spend that money where it is mostly needed. And they are the only ones who know what is the priorities in their community. A local MP has a responsibility to their constituents to listen to what it is that they need and to advocate for their best interests. Infrastructure projects, every project, the best government is least government and closest to the people that it serves.
Thank you, Nadine. Next, we'll hear from Aidan Bloom. Aidan?
Well, I think one thing that some of the candidates have alluded to that I agree with is that when you look at spending and how it's not reaching the municipalities who need it most, you have to ask yourself, is there a systematic issue at play? Is there a bureaucratic issue at play that is stopping this critical funding from reaching the communities that need it most? Of the G7, I know that Canada is one of the worst countries currently when it comes to infrastructure. It is aging, it is crumbling. We are seeing a lot of communities in dire need of the tools to be able to transition, to be able to evolve, to be able to meet the needs of their constituents. And I find that it's municipalities that, when given the tools, are some of the fastest to transition towards a more sustainable, just community. So I have to ask myself, why is Ottawa having such a hard time targeting the right communities? Why are Indigenous communities being left out of the picture? Why are they not receiving the critical infrastructure needs that they've been crying for on deaf ears for what has been decades? And I have to ask my counterparts here, at what point do we start to realize that systemically there are huge inequalities that are not being addressed, and that's including the municipalities that are not seeing the critical funding that they've been demanding for decades? And I think that it's an injustice that we have to figure out, and that if I get to Ottawa, that's one of the first things I'll do. Thank you.
Thank you, Aidan. There's been a technical difficulty. We have lost Nikki, so I am taking over momentarily. Next will be David Gamble.
Yeah, I mean, I want to go back to 1867 though, and think about how when our country was formed, that the federal government of the time viewed provinces as municipalities, basically, little more than. Because why? Because there were very few people in Canada. We were spread across a very vast territory. We've changed a lot in that time. And I think it's time for us to start reevaluating how we work with provinces and municipalities and how money gets doled out and what kinds of powers municipalities and provinces should have. And I think this is definitely a discussion that has to happen with all levels of government. And I personally would fight for that. I think that municipalities should be able to raise money. I think that they should be able to have a deficit. I don't see an issue with that. You know, and deficits are not necessarily a bad thing. And I'll tell you why, because we spend within our means. And it's okay. If we don't spend within our means, we can't afford to pay it back, just like anybody spending money. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm noticing Nikki has returned. I'll let you take the floor, Nikki.
There we go. Thank you, Marilyn. I would now like to call upon Councillor Darrell Bellick to ask the 5th question of the evening. Councillor Bellick.
Yes, thank you, Nikki, and good evening, candidates. In 2017, the Government of Canada passed legislation allowing the RCMP to unionize and bargain collectively for the first time. Several years of negotiation between the union and the federal government resulted in a signed agreement on August 6, 2021. Pardon me. The new agreement allows for retroactive pay increases from April 1st, 2017. The total cost to the city of Airdrie is $4 million. Given that municipalities were not involved or informed about negotiations, it is only fair that the federal government bear the cost of the retroactive pay provisions. The question is, what will your party do to address the RCMP retroactive pay impact on municipalities?
We'll start with Nadine Wellwood, representing the People's Party of Canada.
Thank you. Well, I think the first thing that you do in a case like that is you have to understand the terms and the conditions and what was agreed to. And unfortunately, I wasn't privy to those conversations and to those documents, but you need to review the contracts and the agreements. If it is something that everybody must share a burden of the cost, then it's something that we must share a burden of the cost. But again, it boils down to what and who's responsible. So we have a responsibility through the RCMP. They're currently servicing and providing services. Were those services provided as it per the agreed terms? So I think Canada is a nation of laws, and as a nation of laws, then we have to honor the contracts that we have. Now, I also don't believe that the federal government has the right to interfere in provincial or municipal affairs. And so the first thing that I would do is I would review those contracts, I would review those agreements, and I would bring the parties to the table to negotiate what would be a fair and reasonable path forward. And unfortunately, tonight, without having seen the information that is required, thank you. That's the best that I can offer.
Thank you, Nadine. Next, we'll hear from Carolyn O'Driscoll.
This comment came up actually a couple of days ago at the forum in Cochrane, and I actually said that I've been working in this space, and the lawyer and me said, look at the contract first. I can also share with the audience tonight that I sadly have been involved in numerous lawsuits against the federal government to hold them accountable for work that they have not executed on or done correctly or effectively. That is the reason why I'm here. I think there needs to be proactive solutions built out. You need to go back to the basic principles, and you need to make sure people are not acting outside of their scope of authority, and you should have the stakeholders involved. The municipalities should have been involved in that negotiation on principle, And if the mechanisms have not been properly built, the government, I would suggest, in the best interest of taxpayers, should correct it so that there is no lawsuit necessary for the municipalities to be made whole for any harm that them not being at the table and being bound to a contract causes. So I think you go back to the basics and let's be proactive and get things set up properly once and for all and save taxpayers money. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. Next, we'll hear from Tarek El-Nagata.
So this is a case of too much Ottawa, not enough West, and not enough at the local level. In my talks with city staff, they said that they did not have even an observer seat. Obviously, Airdrie seen as too small of sadly it's seen as too small of a municipality to have a negotiating seat. So the short-term and the long-term answers to this. The short-term answer is, where was our representation at the Treasury Board at a federal level to appropriate those funds and make sure that those funds are now allocated to our municipality? The long-term impact of this is the city of Airdrie residents are now going to see a 5 to 7% increase on their property taxes because that's where they have to shoulder it. What I'd like to see is eventually, as we move away from Ottawa and move into the West, is a provincial police or a regional police, so that the city of Airdrie then has a closer access and a closer seat at the table in terms of negotiations of contract. That would be the long-term solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Tarek. Next, we'll hear from David Gamble. David?
Hello. Yeah, I answered this question a couple of days ago as well. I was struck by the fact that this is a provincial question because the police, the RCMP, are contracted through the provincial government for as we saw with this whole discussion about having a provincial police force. So there was a question of whether it was cheaper to have a provincial police force or RCMP, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this is really, I would say, if you did not get money from the provincial government to account for this, that's where I would go, because obviously they would have been part of that discussion and they need to work harder for you. And I know Jason Kenney's been on vacation, but I don't know you know, if he's been paying attention to this or not.
Thank you, David. Next, we'll hear from Ron Voss. Ron?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, one of the important steps for Alberta in becoming an independent nation is to put its own house in order regarding self-determination. And that will involve creating our own provincial police force. So we don't have to worry about the issues that we have with the federal government. The RCMP will be sent packing. I went to Fort McLeod just a while ago and learned about the Northwest Mounted Police, who were the predecessors to the RCMP, and maybe we'll call this new police force the NWMP. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Next, we'll hear from Aidan Bloom. Aidan?
So one thing I think Albertans have to hear is that your provincial government under Jason Kenney has been cutting and slashing since the moment he got into office. One of the key aspects and one of the key departments that has seen the brunt of some of these cuts has been the emergency services in the major cities and in the rural parts of the province. Now, I'm running for federal MP of Banff Airdrie. So what can I honestly do in this specific topic? If elected, I can put pressure in the House of Commons to ensure that the specific constituents of Banff Airdrie receive the funding that they need for emergency services across the riding where the provincial government is lacking. I can push for a private member's bill that ensures that some critical funding get passed to go to the provinces whose premiers are not doing the job that they should be doing, and with a conditional grant that ensures that either you take this money and you give it to the constituents who need it for their emergency services, including the RCMP, or you don't. And then I would leave that to the hands of the province, and it's time for Alberta to realize that their province is not being run with a future in mind. And I think that the most important thing we can do for our RCMP and for all of our services that have been so critical to the province is to ensure that they're growing and that they're receiving the resources they need so that they're not being suffocated by a system that does not care for the services that so many Albertans depend on. And that's what I would do. Thank you.
Thank you, Aidan. We've lost Nikki again. Next, we will have Blake Richards.
So this is an issue where it comes to being able to advocate for your local community, and that's something that I've always done, something that I always will do. Now, this has been an issue that I've talked to a number of our municipal mayors and councillors about. I don't think we've had a chance to chat about it there, but I know Al Jones and I have chatted about it fairly extensively, and we're still trying to get completely to the bottom of this. But I mean, obviously, the first step here is that the federal government contracts the RCMP to the province, and then the province has a contract with the municipalities. So I find it very hard to imagine the federal government can impose this upon our communities. However, having just heard the Liberal candidate who's now had the chance to prepare for this sort of seem to duck the responsibility on this one, I'm a little bit more concerned than I was before. We will certainly get to the bottom of this, and I don't believe that municipalities should be paying for a decision made by the federal government.
Thank you, Blake. Next, we will have Derek Sloan.
Okay, well, thank you for that question. And when I spoke to Mayor Brown and others in this riding, it's clear that this is an issue that's affecting many municipalities. And it is unfair on the face of it that now all of a sudden the municipalities are on the hook for $4 million, which they hadn't budgeted for. And of course, they didn't have a seat at the table. And it's concerning and frustrating. And it raises the question, of course, as many have said before, of perhaps the need for a provincial police force. That is a provincial question, but it's something that I have considered, and I think there may be some merit to it. I would say that this poses an even bigger issue with respect to the downloading of services to municipalities. Municipalities have been put more and more on the hook for funding because provincial and federal governments are wasteful. They don't want to raise the taxes themselves. So they download things onto the municipalities and expect them to raise property taxes and things like this. This, in fact, increases taxes, increases the cost of living, but it doesn't put the blame where it belongs, which is on our federal and provincial governments wasting money.
Thank you, Derek. And last for the question will be Sarah.
Hi there. From what I understand, our municipalities have a really good working relationship with their local RCMP detachments. Many of the municipalities, they knew that the RCMP union was in negotiation and are fine with the rate increase, but having a big bill for retro pay is hard to swallow. Some municipalities did budget for it, and for that, that's amazing. But that's still a lot. So, it would be nice if there was some federal or provincial help to help the municipalities pay for a portion of the wage increases. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. And that concludes that question. I would now like to call upon Councillor Tina Petro to ask the sixth question of the evening.
Sorry, thank you so much, Marilyn. Thank you to the candidates. So municipalities are on the front line when it comes to access to affordable, both below market and market housing. Access to appropriate housing allows individuals and families to thrive and contribute to their communities. Federal affordable housing initiatives have helped increase the number of units across Canada, but disproportionately funding has gone to major urban centers. The question is, what will your party do to address affordable housing challenges in smaller urban municipalities across Canada? Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. And now to address the question, I will ask Derek Sloan to begin.
Well, I love this question. And in fact, many things play into this. And one is the massive amounts of cheap money and historically low interest rates that we've seen in the wake of COVID-19, the most significant government spending of all time in this country. Another is unrestricted foreign access to our residential real estate markets. A third is the red tape and cost associated with development. A fourth is the dearth of good paying middle-class jobs. I believe we need to stop the flow of cheap credit and the inflationary government spending. I believe we need to prevent foreign non-resident Canadian purchasing of residential real estate, decrease red tape for development, and also provide municipal land for small, cheap houses and other innovations like House in a Box. Look that up, folks, that are now available and very cost effective. Finally, we need to get Alberta's economy back on track by getting out of the Paris Agreement and becoming energy independent with a coast-to-coast pipeline network with tidewater access on both sides of the country. Thank you so much.
Thank you all, and we apologize for our technical difficulties. We do have our moderator back with us this evening. We are doing our absolute best to give you all the 1 minute. And we are back on with Nikki. Nikki, please take the floor.
There we go. Thank you, Marilyn. It's just a seamless transition between you and I. We work so well together at the Chamber. Okay. Next, we will hear from Carolyn O'Driscoll. Carolyn?
Thank you. Housing is not a simple matter at all, and it is again one of these areas that touches on, I would argue, collaboration between multiple levels of government. I think what is important to recognize is the way development has been happening across our constituency has been bumbled at best. We're seeing developments built out without the infrastructure in place. There is a massive problem when we're not taking into account all the aspects that are necessary to be factored in when we do good strategic regional planning. If you have the right stakeholders at the table, be the developers, as well as the people who are actually going to be purchasing the homes and who actually need the homes in the particular areas and regions within our constituencies. Again, we are seeing a classic example of government making assumptions and picking priorities and not making sure the stakeholders are at the table to build a plan that makes sense and will execute.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Aidan Bloom. Aidan?
So when it comes to affordable housing, I think one of the biggest problems that I'm hearing amongst many of the establishment big two or big three parties is that their solution to the unaffordability of housing is to build more homes. You're hearing 500,000 homes. You're hearing a couple million homes over X amount of years. I think that's not tackling the problem, what's making these houses unaffordable. I think one of the most important things we can do is ban home ownership from those who don't live within the country. I think one of the most important things we can do is ensure all new housing developments are going to have a new threshold of 50% of all new houses that are built are going to have to be affordable to the lowest income bracket of Canadians. Having a renters association that acts as a middleman to protect those who are renting at the bargaining table when they're trying to find a home to live in as well. Ensuring that we have a luxury tax on all homes after your first home to ensure we have the revenue needed to build the new affordable housing projects.
Thank you, Aidan. Next, we'll hear from Tarek. Tarek?
Thank you. So the first thing is the distribution of affordable housing politicized to go into major urban centers where that's the highest concentration of voters? And that's again a question of Ottawa trying to keep Ottawa power rather than moving it to the west. So non-politicizing that spending. Two, I agree with Mr. Bloom and Mr. Sloan, completely banning foreign purchases of our real estate and also tighter and stricter money laundering controls. Vancouver is right now the highest money laundering funneled city in North America at the moment. Three is regionalized mortgage rules. So right now, buying a house in Airdrie or in Crossfield, you're subject to the same mortgage rules as buying a house in Toronto. So why do we have that level of barriers to a much more affordable housing market? And then four is working with municipalities to look at how we build zoning in terms of pricing affordability in the structure of the units so that it's affordable for folks to buy. Thank you.
Thank you, Tarek. Next, we'll hear from Nadine. Nadine?
Well, this one's a little dear to my heart because my husband has been trying to develop affordable housing for Canadians and in particular people in BC, which is seeing some of the hottest, highest prices in the country. And you want to know what his biggest obstacle is? The government. It is the government. The government is the one that is responsible primarily for causing unaffordable homes. And they are the ones that are preventing developers from meeting the needs of the community. And that's what needs to stop. We need smaller government, less bureaucracy, less regulation. Again, we need to bring things back to home. Local municipalities, what do the communities need? And then allow private industry to get in there and solve the problems. Again, less government, not more. We need to trust that Canadians have the solutions and will implement the right policies and do the right thing. And I am confident that our Canadian business people will do exactly that if only given the opportunity, and the government will get out of their way.
Thank you, Nadine. Next, we'll hear from David. David?
Yeah, as a former chair of the Cochrane Society for Housing Options, this particular set of policies that the Liberal government or a future Liberal government could enact is very exciting to me. I will probably not be able to get through them all. One is there's for new homeowners, there's this, it's kind of like a TFSA to save up money for their down payment. We have a rent to own option. We have the Rapid Housing Fund, the CHMC. We also are taxing banks making more than $5 billion, 3%, and that money is going to housing projects. We've just got so many different things on the go that are just going to make a huge difference. Another one is that we have an anti-flipping rule. So houses have to be owned for 12 months or be subject to a tax, except for certain things like death or divorce, things like that. So it's going to really cool down the market a lot more than some other measures that people have mentioned, and it's enactable. And I think that's very important. But do check it out. There's a lot more stuff than what I just said. And there's some great presentations that outline all the details.
Thank you, David.
You're welcome.
Next, we'll hear from Blake. Blake?
This is a real issue. I mean, it's a real issue for a lot of young people looking to get into a home. And it's also an issue for our economy. It's holding our economy back, frankly, I believe. And so we have a very extensive affordability plan, particularly for housing in our Canada's recovery plan. I'll mention a couple of the points in that. First of all, we'd encourage private sector investment in purpose-built rental housing, for example. We'd also review the most extensive real estate holdings in Canada, which is the federal government's, to try and release at least 15% of those for homes. But I'll finish with the one thing that we wouldn't do, and that's tax the capital gains of the sale of your home, like the Liberal government is planning to do. There's been a number of steps they've taken towards this, and if they're reelected, I have no doubt that they will be looking to tax the sale of your home, and we would stop that.
Thank you, Blake. Next, we'll hear from Sarah. Sarah?
Hi there. The NDP have a whole plan to tackle housing crisis, wealth taxing, a livable basic income, poverty reduction. 1 in 3 Canadians are renters. We would fight money laundering. The NDP want to create 500,000 affordable quality homes, with half done within 5 years. We want to do a 20% foreign buyers tax. This will be achieved with, the homes will be achieved with the right mix of partnerships with provincial and municipal governments. We would support rental co-ops. This will create thousands of jobs and jumpstart the economy. We want to do rent relief, double home buyers tax credit to $1,500, reintroduce 30-year CMHC insured mortgages. So that would help lower payments for first-time home buyers. And yeah, that's part of what we're doing. We have more on our platform.
Thank you, Sarah. Next, we'll hear from Ron. Ron, floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I guess if I understand, one of the issues is the immigration policy. And that would be another area where, as becoming independent, we put our house in order by having control on immigration. When you have a high level of unemployment, and then you have a policy from the federal government to have unrestricted immigration, that doesn't help. If you're unemployed, you won't be able to own anything, not even be able to buy food. So, and the other part I understand, the carbon tax, that increases the cost of everything. The government's got a printing press going as if money grows on trees, which is going to cause inflation. That makes the cost higher. I think recently the cost of lumber has really got expensive. So it's getting even more expensive to build homes. Anyways, that's my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Public questions have been coming in from our virtual audience, And we thank everybody for your great submissions. Our volunteers have been working really, really hard to try to group things together and respecting time. We want to remind everyone that after this event is done, you are more than welcome to reach out to your candidates. A recording of this will be available for rewatching off of the Chamber website. We have 2 more questions to go through, and candidates will have 60 seconds to answer each question. We're only going to have 4 to 5 candidates respond to each of the next 2 questions, and then we will round out the evening with 90 seconds of closing remarks, and then closing remarks from our Executive Director, Marilyn Allhurst, and Mayor Peter Brown. So we're going to go forward with question number 7, which is our first question submitted on behalf of the Circle for Indigenous Relations, Airdrie and Area. Have you read the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada Call to Action report? And more importantly, which of the 94 calls to action will you focus on if elected? For this group, we are going to hear from 5 of the candidates that have been randomly selected, and we will start with Tarek.
So our position on Indigenous relations and First Nations relations is very clear. What we want to do is a couple of things. One is end all boil water advisories for the reserves and do that immediately. 2 is get out of the antiquated and offer First Nations the opportunity to get out of the antiquated Indian Act, including even its name right now is. And then the third thing is settle all land disputes and treaty disputes that are still outstanding. So those would be the 3 things that we would take action on. Thank you.
Thank you, Tarek. Next, we'll call upon Sarah. Sarah, can you unmute yourself?
The NDP will implement that. I'm bad with acronyms. The act. And we would work with Indigenous communities and listen and see what they directly need. Not all Indigenous communities are under a boil water advisory. There has been a lot of progress made, and we would do our best to each individual community and listen and see what we can do. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Next, we'll ask Aidan Bloom to answer the question. Aidan?
Well, I'll start by saying, as I look around the panel, I don't see any Indigenous voices at the table tonight. I don't see any Indigenous voices at most of the tables where we're discussing Indigenous issues. And I'll say that the boil water advisories is a given. I think the fact that we've gone more than a couple of decades now hearing that as a headline time and time again and not seeing that done is a disgrace on one of the richest nations on earth. I think when you look at the foster care system and you look at how 7.7% of children in the country are Indigenous, but yet 52.2% of the children in the foster care system are Indigenous, is just one of the signs of just how much we are failing these communities. Of course, we're going to implement, as the Green Party, all 94 of the recommendations in the Truth and Reconciliation report. That's all 94. So not which ones are we going to, we're going to implement all 94. And we're going to make sure that we work with each and every one of the communities in the riding on behalf of myself to try to find the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. Thank you.
Thank you, Aidan. Next, we'll call on Ron Voss to answer the question. Ron, could you unmute your microphone?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I have not read the Truth and Reconciliation report, so I can't pinpoint this or that aspect I think would be important. But from my understanding and hearing a lot of people, I think one of the issues is to get out of the Indian Act. And if I think of the abuse that Alberta has received from the federal government, I think that's less than the abuse that our First Nations have received from the federal government. And I think as we become an independent nation, we will be able to deal with these issues in a better manner, and there won't be any boil water advisories, which is ridiculous that the federal government can't manage that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. And last for this question, we'll call upon Nadine Wellwood. Nadine, could you unmute your microphone, please?
So our Green Party candidate seems to think there is no Indigenous voice around this table. You couldn't be more wrong. I am Métis. I grew up in Labrador. My brother is Innu Nation. And I'm going, our Indian population, and I'm not afraid to say it, this is not about political correctness. This is about doing what needs to be done and saying what needs to be said. The Indian Act is paternalistic and it needs to be turfed out. We need to have a brand new relationship with the Indigenous people and the population that we have. But the first thing is that we all need to come in at an even playing field. There is not them and us. Truth and reconciliation, if you want to destroy anything of any value in that document, is to say that you're going to implement all 94 recommendations, because that's impossible. This is exactly what the United Nations do. Oh, we have 300 goals. Well, the way to kill any plan is to actually promise more than you can actually deliver. So pick the 1, 2, 3 things that you can actually deliver on, and then you focus on those. So if our Indigenous...
Thank you, Nadine. One last question from the next group of candidates, and then we will have our closing remarks. We are running slightly behind schedule, doing our best to hear all the good conversation. So one last question, and then the final remarks from all candidates, and then closing remarks from Marilyn and Mayor Brown. The last question: if elected, how will you stand up for the democratic rights and freedoms of all Canadians? This group has been randomly selected, and we will start with Blake Richards. Blake, could you unmute your mic, please?
This has been something that has been critical in a lot of the work that I've done as your member of parliament. For example, in the last 6 years, when Justin Trudeau tried to remove the ability for his government to be held accountable in the House of Commons, there was a whole host of things he was doing there. As the Democratic Reform critic for our party at the time, I fought back hard on this, and we were able to put a stop to what he was trying to do there. When he tried to change the electoral system to his own advantage, we were able to put a stop to that as well. And then recently, when he tried to censor the internet with Bill C-10, we were able to push back, and I actually was able to raise a point of order in the House of Commons that was able to stop him from having undemocratic votes that would have led this bill to being passed. We were able to stop that bill from getting through Parliament prior to his election. So I will always stand up and fight for you and your freedoms as your member of Parliament.
Thank you, Blake. Next, we'll call upon David Gamble. David, could you unmute your microphone, please?
Yes. Yeah, I'm happy to answer this question. I mean, I just want to point out a recent example, actually. I really care about democracy and fairness so much, to the point that I don't care whether somebody agrees with me or not. I will fight for them. And this happened just a couple days ago in Cochrane when Nadine Wellwood was being told that she couldn't come and participate even though she had a doctor's note. And I asked the question, well, why are you not doing this? They're like, well, it's not on the right form. And I'm like, it doesn't matter if it's on the right form. It's a doctor's note. You better be sure that you know that this is not a legit format, because she's going to have a legitimate concern here if you kick her out. And so I fought hard for her, and it worked out, and she was able to do what she was brought to do, right? And I think it's important that we hear everyone's voices, whether we agree with people or not. And that's the kind of person I am, and that's what I would do in Parliament.
Thank you, David.
You're welcome.
Now we'll ask Derek Sloan to unmute your mic. Derek?
Yeah, thank you so much. Democracy is very important. And right now what we're seeing is every Canadian will likely still be allowed to vote, but they may not be able to be allowed to shop or to eat at restaurants. And so I am firmly against the new vaccine passport system that's coming into place. I also believe that the rights of business owners to be open, to have a living, to provide for their families is paramount in this country. And yes, it is true that we all have the right to vote, and I will always fight for that. But we also have a right to live. We have a right to live in Canada, to have a business, to operate, to provide for our families. And it's very frightening to see what we're seeing. With respect to freedom of speech, it is under attack in this country. We are seeing more and more legislation coming in that is leading towards censorship on the internet. The big tech companies are already doing it. I did a parliamentary press conference in the fall that was censored by YouTube. It had the most views of any video on CPAC of all time in 2 days. You can still watch it on my website, dereksloan.ca.
Thank you, Derek. Last, we'll ask Carolyn O'Driscoll to unmute your mic and answer this question. Carolyn?
Hi, thank you for the question, and sorry I haven't been the best on the Zoom here. How will I stand up to advocate for your rights and freedoms? One, I will seek out the information and I will seek out understanding the root issues and get the expert information we need to make informed decisions. I will then inform my constituents and empower them with that knowledge so they can give me guidance on what they want advocated for in Parliament. I will then, third, advocate their wishes and wants in Parliament to truly exercise the rights they have as members of this democracy. And four, I will demand that the executive, that's the ministers and all the departments and agencies of our government, are actually delivering on the promises and commitments and legally binding obligations they have to us as citizens. By making sure our democracy functions and holding all aspects of it to account, we will uphold the rights and freedoms of Canadians to the betterment of everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. This concludes the question and answer portion of our evening. We'll now move on to closing statements from each of our candidates. Everyone will be given 90 seconds for closing remarks, and our order for closing remarks is in reverse alphabetical order. We will start with Sarah Zagoda, representing the NDP party. Sarah?
Hi there. I would like to be your voice in Parliament for our area, and I'd like to say a quote: "The forest was shrinking, but the trees kept voting for the axe. For the axe convinced the trees he was one of them because his handle was made of wood." Something like that. I think we need to change things up. We have to vote for a different. We have to vote NDP here. We need to look out for everybody and not have a member of Parliament who's a whip and their job is to convince other people to vote to party lines and not their core beliefs and what's best for the community that they are actually representing. And I will be that person. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Next, we'll hear from Nadine Wellwood, representing the People Party of Canada. Nadine?
Canadians are uniting under the umbrella of the People's Party of Canada. We are uniting Canadians with shared values and common sense principles of freedom, fairness, respect, and responsibility. I am an Albertan. This is my home, and you are my family. As a member of your Parliament, I will represent you, my constituents, and my province, Alberta, first. What is good for Alberta is good for all of Canada. Alberta can lead Canada in a strong economic recovery. More Alberta oil and gas, not less. We need to reject the carbon tax that is causing the price of food and affordability for Canadians to skyrocket. We need to stop the money printing press. At $1.3 trillion in debt and borrowing at $424 million a day, inflation is skyrocketing, and it is the government printing presses that are causing this. Government is the biggest expense in the lives of Canadians. Lastly, tonight you heard from every party on this platform, and it was more government, more spending, bigger deficits, bigger debt, promises they cannot fund. Lastly, again, we need to reject vaccine passports and mandatory vaccines. Every Canadian has the right to make their own informed decisions, and it is your choice to accept or reject a medical procedure. In my Canada, all Canadians have equal rights, not some more than others. And people, innovation, and small businesses are the solution.
Thank you, Nadine. Next, we'll call on Ron Voss, independent candidate, for closing remarks. Ron?
Thank you. In 1904, Mr. Clifford Sifton, Canada's Interior Minister, told a Winnipeg audience, "We all desire, every patriotic Canadian desires, that the great trade of the prairie shall go to enrich our own people in the East, to help build the factories and workshops of Eastern Canada, and to contribute in every legitimate way to its prosperity." Alberta, along with Saskatchewan, became part of Confederation in 1905. It wasn't long before the prairie provinces understood the implications of what Sifton had said. This is the now famous milk cow political cartoon. And first in 1915, after Alberta had entered Confederation. On the left, you have three prairie provinces laboring away, feeding the cow, whereas at the other end of the cow, you have central Canada collecting the proceeds from the efforts in pails labeled Ottawa, Toronto, and Montreal. This perspective of Alberta functioning as a colony of Canada has persisted ever since, with the introduction of the Equalization Program in '57 and Trudeau's National Energy Program in the early '80s. As my friend and Alberta patriot Tex Lugner often says, Alberta must secede from the con of Confederation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Next, we'll hear from Derek Sloan, independent candidate. Derek?
Thank you so much for having me here tonight. The political system has become a game, and unfortunately, the parties control the process. And I know because I was there. And when you're in Parliament, if you want, you can have a nice kind of cushy ride. And the more you play the game and the more you kind of do what you're told, you can be there for a long time. And really, in my life, I don't believe Canada has time, nor does anybody have time for us to sit down and be quiet. And if I wanted to be quiet in Parliament, I could have, and I could have had a long, quiet, and unproductive career. But I decided to stand up, and I was ejected from the party, and I'm here today as an independent. And I want to say that Canadians don't often elect independents, but I'm telling you that electing an independent in this election will send a strong message. I have been the strongest fighter for freedoms in Parliament, whether it's vaccine passports, internet censorship, lockdowns, Quebec's unilateral change of the Constitution, the mail-in balloting, all of these things. In many cases, I've been the only voice on these issues. Do not let my voice go silent. I have been standing up for the pastors that are in jail. I've been standing up for the businesses that have been closed. I've been standing up for our freedoms, both in Parliament and outside. Talk can be cheap, but I've also been at the head of rallies that have been speaking out against injustices that have been going on. I've received tickets from the police for doing so. I am in this fight, and I will not back down, regardless of the consequences. Thank you so much, and God bless Alberta.
Thank you, Derek. Next, we'll hear from Blake Richards, representing the Conservative Party. Blake?
First, I'll say thank you to you, Nikki, for your great job moderating tonight. Thank you to the Chamber, the city, and Krebs, and all the others that were involved in organizing and sponsoring this event. And most importantly, thank you to all of the people who are attending tonight to give us a chance to share our platforms with you. Now, I'm standing tonight on my record. You know how hard that I've worked for you as your member of Parliament. You know how committed I am. You know how dedicated I am to serving you and serving our community. And I really do believe that local representation is critically important. That's why I always seek out your viewpoints and try to be your voice in Ottawa. And I've been able to consistently get results for our community and for you and your families. It didn't matter whether I was in government or in opposition. Didn't matter whether in my, early in my time in Parliament as a backbench MP in the government, or now in one of the most senior roles in my party. I'm always able to find a way to get results, because local representatives can make a difference if they know how to work, and I can certainly do that. But I'll say also, from the perspective of the national election, we can't afford another 4 years of Justin Trudeau. We need to stand together. We need to take back our Canada, and I ask you for your support to secure our future together.
Thank you, Blake. Next, we'll call on Carolyn O'Driscoll, independent candidate. Carolyn?
Hello, everyone, and thank you again for hosting this evening, and thank you to all those participants that are still here 2 hours in to hear our final concluding remarks. It is a very challenging decision that everyone has hanging over them for Monday. There's a lot of questions to ask, and there are a lot of concerns as to the implications of which party goes into power. But what's most important is you have to bring it home. Regardless of which party is in power, does the representative that you elect in our riding have the skill set to ensure that they will deliver on the things that you need done, regardless of the color sitting in that power position? My comment to you, as you were probably asking why go independent, is how can an independent possibly have a voice? Look at the track record that has unfolded in this campaign alone. Look at the answers that have evolved with my participation as part of the conversation in these forums. We now have candidates across the board talking about looking at root issues, engaging stakeholders, bringing local voice to the table, collaborating with multiple levels of government and taking action. Concepts that were not in the prepared speeches when we first started this process 2 weeks ago. Independent voice can and does have a powerful influence and can evoke change. You are respectful, hardworking, and intelligent voters. Make a vote so you have the opportunity to make the change and make the difference. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Caroline. We'll next call upon David Gamble, representing the Liberal Party of Canada. David?
Friends, this election is about what Canada is going to look like going forward as we come out of the virus together, as we've worked so hard over these several months to do so. I'm confident in the parties, the Liberal Party of Canada's plan for the future and the plan that has been brought forward since then. What I'd be really scared of, however, is a government that wants to emulate Jason Kenney. And that's what Erin O'Toole would like to do. And that would be devastating for our country at this really delicate time. As an individual, I just also want to be clear that I would represent this riding as both, a Liberal Party member, but also as an individual who's willing to fight for anybody, regardless of their beliefs. As a progressive, as a moderate Liberal, I will be there to fight for you. And one thing I want to be really clear about is I understand oil and gas. And while it'd be irresponsible to promise people that they'll get their old jobs back, we've got plans to help everyone get back to work and to decarbonize our economy, along with all the large companies, oil and gas companies. Shell was a major leader in that, for example, of decarbonizing way before anyone told them they had to. Our oil and energy companies, they are full of really smart people. They're going to get the job done. We need to support them. We need to give them the predictability of a carbon tax, and we need $10 a day daycare, and we need to fix our housing. And I know that our plan will do these things and will help us. Thank you all very much. I hope you'll vote for me on Monday and send me to Parliament where I can fight for your rights.
Thank you, David. Next, we'll ask Tarek Eldnaga, representing the Maverick Party, to unmute your mic and have your closing remarks. Tarek?
Thank you for having me this evening. I appreciate it. Friends, I started our discussion by talking about Western values. I want to see those Western values come roaring back, the Western values of perseverance, of grit, of community, and really unbridled growth that the West has been always known for and has sadly seen an attack on over the last few years. I want to bring them back. For decades, we've voted the same way. We've always voted blue, yet the government has decided before Manitoba votes. If we keep voting the same way, we're going to keep getting the same results, and our issues are going to take a back seat always to Eastern Canada. At the Maverick Party, we have 5 core constitutional amendments that we want to make to bring equity and fairness back to Western Canada, including scrapping equalization in its entirety. And if you're worried about another Justin Trudeau government, I will tell you, do not worry. We have gone on the record saying that in a confidence motion, we will support Erin O'Toole's government, but it will come with the demand, the first demand of scrapping the carbon tax. So we could do this where we get rid of Justin Trudeau and elect a powerful group of mavericks that speak exclusively for Western issues. And I'll always say, be bold, be fierce, be Western, vote Maverick.
Thank you, Tarek. Now we'll call upon Aidan Bloom, representing the Green Party, for the closing remarks. Aidan?
Thank you, and thanks to everybody for coming out tonight and for being able to watch this on Zoom. I know it's not the in-person debate that we're used to having these times of year and these times of elections. I wanted to start very quickly by apologizing to Nadine, actually, for my mistake earlier. I was not aware that she was Métis, and that is on me. So I think what's important to leave with tonight is that the cost of living is going up. This is a given. We all know this is happening. The housing market has never been rigged worse for the person trying to get their first home, trying to rent, trying to secure housing for themselves and their family. We're seeing this pandemic where we found $400+ billion to spend on everything but the people who needed it the most. You saw provinces and governments of all levels finding ways to cut and slash the moment they could to the programs and services that had been keeping us afloat during the last 18 to 19 months. Now tonight, I feel like I haven't done as well as I would have liked. I do honestly feel like I've let everyone watching down a little bit tonight. I feel like when I came into this election brand new, I wanted to earn your trust, and I still do. And I think every day I'm learning more and more. I think tonight was a stepping stone for me, and just how much more work is going to be needed to be able to learn enough to be able to lead and be the MP that you deserve. And I hope every day to earn your trust along the way to be that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Aidan. And thank you all for providing your closing remarks. At this point, my job as moderator is concluding, and I would now like to invite the Airdrie Chamber of Commerce Executive Director, Marilyn Alhus, and Mayor Peter Brown to close out the forum. Mayor Brown?
Thanks, Nikki, and everyone recognized you already, but I will as well. Great job moderating tonight. Thank you so much. Thanks to everyone for taking the time out of their evening to listen to all these different perspectives. Very much appreciated getting to know many of you. I've talked to a number of you, but it was nice to hear the answers to the questions that people had, and I really appreciate and respect anyone running for office, and I congratulate all of you, regardless of who's successful. We thank you. Also, just want to thank the Chamber and our sponsor, CREB, for making this evening possible, and remind anybody this will be, if you haven't had an opportunity to review this, it will be live. I'm sure Marilyn's going to let you all know in 24 hours. It'll be up on the Chamber website. And just to tell everyone to have a really safe evening and have a wonderful evening. And again, thank you for participating, candidates. Much appreciated. Marilyn.
Thank you, Mayor Brown. Yes, absolutely. Thank you to all the candidates here this evening, all of the staff and volunteers who help support and make this forum possible. While the Chamber does not endorse any one candidate, it is our responsibility to help the public and our members better understand the issues at stake in our upcoming federal election and where our candidates stand on business-related issues. If you have any additional questions that we have not been able to ask this evening, please reach out to the candidates directly. This event was recorded. Visit the website in the next 24 hours to find the link. We hope that by attending tonight's event, you have been able to learn and will be able to have an informed vote this upcoming Monday, September 20th. Thank you for attending this virtual event and for your patience as we navigate through these challenging times in a pandemic. Stay safe and well, and good night and best of luck to all.